Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind, Season 5. Let's watch.
The rest are fine and dandy. It stresses me out a little bit.
Why?
Because...
Why do you stress about other people?
I don't stress about other people, but there's couples here that are like so invested, and we're not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're starting to see a theme of criticism, putting her down. Now, that looks like it might be in a camp that he's a dick or that he hates her or something, but it is also still within that conceptual area that he is terrified, and his way of coping with it is to be critical. You know, if you've ever been around a teenager or a middle school age kid and they're insecure, you know, not every teenager would do this, but you can imagine a teenager, they're insecure and they don't know what's going on. And, you know, maybe you have a niece that is insecure, 12 years old. At Thanksgiving, you walk up to her, you haven't seen her a few months, you're like, how you doing? And she'll be like, I don't know, what? Okay, so in that moment, she's being hostile and dickish, but that's not really her purpose, right? What she's trying to avoid is to humiliate herself, and she feels pressure, so she just is hostile, right? So there's a possibility that that's what he's doing. But it's also possible he's just a dick. Certainly he's being a dick. Like when the hallway they met up, he's criticizing her eyelashes. And there's one way to do, and I'm in that camp. I like when I see friends and people that I know in my life at a fancy event, and they just have these giant, it's one thing to have a lot of makeup, and that can, sometimes be like, oh, okay, but it's, for some reason it doesn't, that feeling when you're scratching on chalkboard or you're rubbing styrofoam together. When I see people with eyelashes that look, I don't know what to say, but it hurts my eyes. I'm just like, oh, and so each of their own. Obviously, men have a long history and tradition of adjudicating women's looks. Women are not on the planet to please me with themselves or their looks. They can do whatever they want. But for me, my wife doesn't do that. And I don't think she wants to, but I don't think if she did, she would want to after the fact I was going like this all night. But anyway, so, I get it. I can relate to JP going like, oh, but there's a way to say it, right? Like, the way he was saying it was in the dickish direction. I mean, I would just like to hope for myself. Well, one, I wouldn't say anything in that context. I would just, deal with it. But if I did say something, well, I don't think I'd say anything. I think I would just try to look past it, because it's not that bad as a thing. It's not like I'm completely uncontrollable flinching. But anyway, so for JP, he was in the direction of dickish in that moment, amongst saying nothing else, by the way, right? It's not like he was being lovey-dovey and, oh my God, this is so great, and working with her on the, she's trying to talk with him, and, he's just shutting down and like, there's something wrong with your eyes. And then when now she's like, yeah, I'm feeling kind of, so he's probably perceiving a criticism there, right? Like, he probably knows what she's saying. Like, well, look at them. They're all in love and PDA, and here we are. And so he might feel inadequate or criticized or pressured or something. And instead of having any kind of healthy way of knowing what's going on, because it'd be normal for him to be hurt by that or worried, and to talk about that, it'd be fine. It's like, oh, well, it takes me longer. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it looks that way, but, I do love you. And there's a lot of ways you could say it, but instead he just wants to shut it down. Let's rewatch.
It stresses me out a little bit.
Why?
Why? Like, it's not kind. Like, there's a lot of other ways to say that.
Because...
Why do you stress about other people?
I don't stress about other people, but... There's couples here that are like so invested, and we're not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think there's a chance that they did have a chance, and maybe they still do. I tend to jump to these conclusions, so who knows. But from at least the edit, Taylor might be, and it makes sense, but if they had a chance, Taylor might be eliminating that chance by jumping to these conclusions. I didn't show this scene, but she, upon seeing him in person for the second time. You know, they meet in the hall, then they're separated for, I think, a number of days. They meet, and she talks about how she's like, yeah, it was kind of awkward in the hallway. And she's being very kind about it. And if anything, she was not emphasizing enough how awkward it was. But, you know, she was just kind of bringing that up. And she says, yeah, I was really in my head about it. I cried that night. And he's like, huh, really? And, you know, I could see that, right? If you're Taylor and you get engaged and you want love and you have this vision in your mind, you're like, oh my God, you have all those nerves, and you meet him in the hallway and you're just like, hello, are you there? And yeah, that would be pretty awful. I imagine a lot of people cry themselves to sleep at night after that for a variety of reasons, including this, even when things eventually work out, because it's so weird to have that experience where you're engaged, you see each other in person. You know, you can imagine someone being like, well, it went well, but maybe they're just being polite, and then, you know, tears and sadness and worry that night, especially since they don't let them see each other for a few days after that point. It's just like, where are they? I need that reassurance. And so there's this, and Nick Thompson talked about that with Danielle, that they met in the hallway, and, you know, knowing what we know about Nick and Danielle's relationship, even on the show, but we've heard things about after the show, that for Danielle in particular, that this would really trigger her, that she would have that interaction, you know, and she also had body issues that she talked about. And I think Nick even said that when they finally did meet during the honeymoon, because that night, if you remember from season 2, was when they had that all party with all the cast. And she said she was sick, but I think, I don't want to disclose more information, but I think that Danielle was very triggered by the fact that they met, and even though it went well, because they separate them and then they meet them later, during that separation time, a lot of paranoia and triggering can happen to you, right? So for Taylor, she was talking about how she was really crying about that. And I think she was saying, now that I'm seeing you again and I'm getting at least not a horrible vibe from you, I'm reassured that the relationship might work out. And she had yet to experience his personality beyond that point. And she's like, yeah, you know, I was really crying. I was really hurt. And I was really thinking about things. And basically the conversation, he was like, huh, really? I don't know. And she's like, you didn't worry about things? He's like, no. You didn't think it was awkward? I don't know what he said, but he's like, I don't know. And then basically later on they're talking about how he's like, you think too much about things. And yeah, it's I think there's something going on with JP. A lot of it is revolving around that. A lot of indications of someone that, because if I described JP to you and I said that he was 12, you would say like, well, you know, that's 12. They're insecure and immature. But somehow if you're 30, everyone interprets it differently. But you can be stuck at 12 at the age of 30. Absolutely.
You want food?
Fuck that.
What?
Fuck that.
Fuck that? Are you angry right now?
No.
Yeah, what is going on? So, fuck that? Yeah, she's being so kind and accommodating, doing everything she can. She's just I think she's just trying to have a conversation, honestly. And then he's like, fuck that? Where does that come from? And I think she is right to say that he's angry, because I think he feels pressured. I think he feels criticized. But pal, you're not being criticized. You're being invited into a loving relationship.
Like me and Taylor in like a little rough patch, and I don't know how to fix it.
Stop being a dick. I don't know, just throwing it out there. Talk, compliment her, hold her hand, kiss her. I don't know, just throwing it out there.
You want to go sit at this table?
Sure. I feel like I've been behind the whole trip. Like as soon as we got here, I feel like she wanted to leave, and that hasn't changed.
Boom. Right. Now, in the edit, it has been the opposite, right? So maybe there's a world in which when the cameras aren't there, she is like, I'm done with him, or early on gave signals like she was done. It certainly didn't look that way, and that would be hard to believe, but we don't know. But if we go with the assumption that he's distorted and wrong about this, that points into the camp that I was hypothesizing, that He's massively insecure, and right away, or at some point, was very paranoid that she was going to leave him, and so he just shut down and is waiting for her to prove that she is 100% into him. And this is the terrible irony of having these kinds of schemas, that if you believe that you are unlovable and that people are going to reject you, and you need some way of coping with that. And so one way to cope with it is to shut down and wait. Never put yourself out there. Avoid, but hope. And what will happen is that people will think you're rejecting them. You feel like you're going to be rejected, and so you actually give that feeling to other people inadvertently because you're trying to protect from being rejected. In the meantime, you're rejecting everybody else, but you're not actively rejecting. You're actually desperately wanting them to not reject you. But because your mode and your assumption is rejection, you end up rejecting others. They end up starting to try to work with you, which you interpret as rejection. Like, she's criticizing me. This is more rejection. This is awful. And then you dig in even further. It kind of looks like that.
I don't know what I could say or do. I don't know what anybody could say or do to change that. And it kind of sucks being in that situation.
A couple therapists could do a lot in this situation. It would be, I could, I don't know, fix, but I could explore and seriously address this in 20 minutes. It would not take very long. So there's a lot of people that could help, but the most powerful person in the situation is you, pal. You can change the situation. But he might not be able to because of his schemas. Those are kind of set. They're not set in stone, but they're very semi-permanent until one has the necessary awareness and the time and someone to help you with actually healing from it. So just a snippet on that is, so let's say that he enters therapy and he becomes aware of this schema, even if it exists, I don't know, but let's say that it did. That's one step, but the next step is to have corrective experiences for years in therapy, in the therapy office with the therapist, and cultivating that in the outside world, where he tests the waters of relationships where he's not being rejected and is proven over and over and over again that he's not rejectable, that he is lovable, and that people can be trusted. You can think that, but you have to live it before you feel it, so that you don't do these kinds of defenses anymore.
I think it should be like this fucking hard. I don't know. Everyone else is like, yeah, it's great. Yeah, we had some awkward this or awkward that, but other than that, it's fucking great.
And I'm trying. I want to get past it. Just keep looking forward.
So that sounds like he wants things to work out. And in this moment, I suddenly have a little bit of hope, because this is the first, at least in the edit, where we've seen him try. And and he's not being a dick. He's talking and he's not being a dick. This is the first time we've seen that. So I think this might be reassuring to her, and that could work. I did hypothesize, I wonder if he's the sort of guy that just wants to have a very quiet relationship and it's not pathological. Certainly there are people who want a quiet relationship where it is pathological, meaning that they are being quiet in spite of their own desire not to be, right? But there's some people that they're introverted. But introversion doesn't really fit here, because introversion doesn't mean you don't talk to your fiance. People will say that, like, oh, he's so introverted because he's so quiet with his romantic partner. Introverted people are not quiet with their romantic partners. I mean, they might be on the quiet side maybe, but more often than not, introverted people are quiet in large groups of people, and then they're chatterboxes with their partner because it all comes flying out. And that's their preference, is one-on-one conversations. So it's not introversion, but he could be introverted, but this isn't a presentation of that. But anyway, so he's saying, maybe let's just keep looking forward, and maybe she'll hear that, and maybe this will help, because I was wondering if he doesn't like her. That was one of the hypotheses. I didn't think that was likely, but I did wonder. And him saying this seems to indicate that it's not that.
Keep looking forward, and that's fine. Because all we have is right now. That's all we have.
What is he saying? That's all we have. Okay, so seize the moment, pal. Carpe diem. Kiss her. Show love. Have a conversation. Enjoy yourself.
Okay.
The future is what it will be.
I think he's talking about the altar. I think he's saying, let's not worry about the altar. Okay.
I'm never going to give up.
Okay, I mean, that's maybe reassuring. It sounds like, I mean, I think he's saying I'm in it to win it. I'm not going to break up with you. I don't want to break up with you. So that might get the ball rolling in the direction, and but that doesn't fix the problem, right? I mean, his tendency to be a dick when it doesn't make any sense, and to be triggered and angry when it doesn't make any sense, is not going to go away.
I do love JP. He's genuine. I feel like he's honest. And I've never had an emotional connection though, like the way I do with JP. We could go put our feet in the water. Let's see if it's cold.
And then you hear her say something like that. I've never had a genuine connection like I had with JP. And so either that genuine connection, I mean, I guess we saw a little bit of it in the pods, but it wasn't presented that strong. But we only see a little bit of it. And what is an emotional connection? It's a magical, undefinable thing. So maybe that is not a problem. But it's also a possibility that there isn't really much of an emotional connection, and Taylor either has had a lot of disconnection in her past or doesn't have a lot of experience. I mean, she's only 25, so, you know, it's not a lot of years of experience with dating. So maybe for her, she just haven't had it, you know. Another thing I'll just throw out there that we have to consider for these folks, maybe particularly the younger folks on the show, is that for the majority of their adult life, or a good portion of their adulthood, has been consumed by the pandemic. And loneliness was bad enough as you know, in our culture before, particularly with younger people before the pandemic. Loneliness was, I was making episodes about loneliness and the crisis of loneliness, not only just loneliness and the sadness, but like depression and anxiety and drug abuse and addiction and suicide, and all these things are on the rise, probably because of loneliness. And what do I mean by loneliness? Well, I think it's hard to quantify it exactly, but there's a lot of evidence pointing in the direction that us as humans, in the same way that we need a certain amount of sunlight, you know, for vitamin D, we evolved on the African savanna during the Pleistocene and before in a certain environment, and we adapted to that environment. And we also evolved a lot of impulses and instincts to survive and to procreate, not only for food. You know, it's not a mistake, or it's not random that we have as humans of a craving, most of us, for salty things, fatty things, and sugary things, because on the African savanna, those things were rare but needed. You know, fat has a lot of nutritional value and also a lot of calories. Sugar obviously has a lot of calories, and for salt, you know, you need sodium to a certain extent. But it was rare. You couldn't find that, but what you could find a lot of was fiber. There was a lot of fiber in the environment. So we didn't evolve to crave fiber, because that you would default to eating that anyway. And if you craved fiber in lieu of other things like fats and other kind, then you would just have fiber, and that wouldn't be good for you. So you needed to crave the things that were rare and not crave the things that are commonplace in the environment. And similarly, for us, we evolved as social creatures, and we were never alone, or very rarely were we probably alone. We don't know. We don't have a time machine, but all we have to do is look at hunter-gatherer societies today, and also look at other primates today, and see that, you know, the average chimp or bonobo or gorilla, which are our close cousins, are not alone very often. And they certainly don't, you know, go on their computer for 16 hours a day or go to bed by themselves with a phone. They're constantly around their people, their tribe, their family, their parents, their cousins, you know, they're just right there. And when one of the members of the tribe wanders away or is left behind, they have anxiety, they have a feeling, and they want to run to find. Even if they're the alpha in the group, you know, among certain tribes, they don't like to be alone. They depend on all the others to watch out for, predators and to soothe each other. We evolved is the point. We're programmed, so to speak, to feel sadness when we're separate and to feel soothed and safe when we are together. And in the mainstream American culture, particularly as wealth goes up and as access goes up, people are living in more isolated environments where they, particularly now, right, where you're working from home, you live alone or you live with one person, and your person goes to work every day and you're not around other humans. You might see other humans at the store or something, but you don't know those humans. If anything, those other humans are a threat because you don't know them. We probably also evolved to be scared a little bit of strangers. And so, just think about even just 50 years ago in mainstream American society, or 100 years ago. I just think about my ancestors in Kansas, or my Japanese ancestors were in eastern Washington, central Washington, and then my white ancestors were in Kansas, farmers, that kind of thing. And from my impression, they were around each other all the time, in large families and cousins, and they barely saw strangers. It was very rare, maybe on church day, but probably church day they saw the same sort of church people. It's pretty rare to see anyone that they didn't know very, very well. And the data shows that current people who live in environments that are like that have far fewer rates of depression and anxiety and ADHD and addiction and marital strife, violence, just all the bad things we see in our society. Conspiracy mindedness, extreme attitudes about religion or politics are far lower when we are in an environment where we are around other people. And in the United States, there are pockets of people that are like that, but often these individuals are working class. They can't afford a large place. They have to work together to pay the bills and to make dinner and to take care of their kids. Like, it's a practical thing. But because our American society is so backward, we prefer the other. We prefer to have our own car and our own office and our own bedroom and our own vacuum cleaner and our own pots and pans, and we just want everyone to get away, and our yards get bigger and our fences get further out, and we want these fences to be like, I don't want to see my neighbors, and everyone bothers me, and I'm just gonna because our society values that, because marketers can sell us more shit. If everyone has their own car, then car manufacturers get double the money. Whereas if two people share a car, so they've been feeding us this shit for, decades. Also, just the American ideal of individualism and the paternalistic idea of masculine stoicism and, doing things on your own and you should never depend on others. It just leads to where we're at. And then the pandemic hits and these young people were already suffering, and then they are completely cut off, and all the fear and the loss and the grief and the anxiety. And then they start to date, because I think this was filmed, it's usually filmed like a year earlier, so this would have been, mid-2022. That wasn't that long after the complete shutdowns, right? And, just imagine the stuntedness. So my point is that it's possible that for Taylor, she doesn't know what a close, connected relationship looks like. And when she meets JP, to her, it's the closest relationship she's ever had. But because of the environment, she's never had an actual, even average close relationship. So to her, this is better, but it's still not ideal. From the edit, from my vantage point, that's kind of the way it looks, but I don't know. It's also possible that JP is stunted because that, 30 isn't that old. So, he had, more years where he was, but like I said, younger people today are much more lonely than we were when it's hard to measure exactly, but there's, it stands to reason. So their awkwardness, might be influenced heavily by all those things I was talking about. I don't know.
P and I, go through this experiment, and at the end of it, we're married, happy, and we got this badass life waiting for us.
Think it's gonna be cold?
It's probably gonna be a little cold, but not too cold.
But at the same time, he's quiet, he's shy, and That's fine.
I just keep trying to figure out what went wrong. So another factor is that as a kindergarten teacher, so if you ever so I would see this with my mom at the daycare that she had in our house, that she would spend 99% of her socializing time with kids, not only with kids in her daycare, but us kids. There were 4 kids in my family. And so my mom rarely had adult to adult interactions. You know, my dad would come home and they'd have interactions, and then the parents would come pick up the kids, so there'd be like these brief interactions. But my mom had far more interactions with children, and I noticed that sometimes she would start treating everyone like they were 4 years old. Her tone of voice, the way she would approach them, the assumptions she would make about people, which isn't a bad idea, honestly, to appeal to everyone's inner child, which I think is a skill of hers. But it is possible that for Taylor, she's gotten so used to hanging out with kindergarten kids that when she meets JP, that to her, he seems so adult-like and so competent and whatnot, and so connected to her, but it's just in contrast to the fact that normally she's interacting with 5- and 6-year-olds. I don't know. That's pretty insulting to JP. I don't mean that insultingly. I'm just saying, you know, it could be a factor.
Dated quiet people before, but I've never made a lifelong commitment to somebody before that's quiet. And like, sure, I'm talkative, but I can't talk for the rest of my life. Like,
I would not call her talkative. I would not say that she's a quote unquote a chatterbox. I would say, I wouldn't say that at all. I would say that there are other people on these shows that are like that. Like if she were quote unquote talkative, or, you know, an over talker or chatterbox, then she would actually fit really well with JP, because she would just, I know couples that are like this, where someone just talks and talks and talks and talks and talks, and the quiet person is just like, you know, and the quiet person doesn't really want to talk. They don't care to. They're not excited about how much the other person talks, but they don't mind, and they complement each other, you know. And this person will talk at and maybe with at times, but they're just talking, and this person's like, So that's not what we see. What we see is her looking at him and saying, "So, do you want to get some food?" Fuck that, you know. It's or nothing. So I wouldn't say she's talkative. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if she's on the non-talkative side, given the way that dynamic played out. Because if she were talkative, then she wouldn't even notice that he was quiet.
I don't know, JP. If I didn't care, I wouldn't be here. I still have love and care for you.
Just keep trying.
Okay. I don't know if this is edited, but she says, "I still love you." And he says, "Gotta keep trying." What is he saying? Is he's like, please keep trying, because I need you to put a lot of effort into this because I'm terrified? Or I don't know what he's meaning by that.
I just don't lose you.
I just don't want to lose you. Yeah, okay. JP, just stick in that zone. If you can say something, say that. That'll help, I think. Yeah, that's interesting. So you probably saw this episode before I watched it, and you probably knew that these little snippets were happening. And it seems like that hypothesis, that the main hypothesis area that I was talking about, is looking pretty likely given the things that he's saying. All right, well, I want to remind everyone that we have merch. There should be links below to get t-shirts and mugs and that sort of thing. Kind of a fun thing to do. And for the record, I wear recreationally a lot of the merch t-shirts because I like the thickness and the feel of the cotton shirt. I don't know what material, but it feels like cotton. I'm very particular about t-shirts, by the way. Like when I go to the mall, it's possible that, and I'm always going up t-shirt and I'm feeling it, and there's a feel that I'm looking for. I feel like t-shirts, they're not like they used to be. And a lot of t-shirts are really thin, almost see-through, and I just want like a shirt, you know, just your basic shirt. This merch does. The feel is great. The durability is good. So, just for the record, because sometimes when I'm buying a shirt online, I'm like, I want that shirt, but I can't feel it. And you want someone to give some indication of the thickness or the feel or what it feels like in your body. Anyway, So yeah, merch if you're into it. I'm also on Cameo if you're into it. And everyone, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.